It feels like spring is barely here, but if you're like pretty much every other parent I talk to, summer is already looming heavily overhead. And the prospect of trying to figure out how to set everyone up for success can be stressful and overwhelming. And even more so when you have kids who are neurodivergent. And maybe you can't just sign them up for the local summer camp the whole summer. So I'm excited to dig into this topic today with Debbie Reber. She is the host of the Full Tilt Parenting podcast. She's the founder of Tilt Parenting and the author of Differently Wired. And she has tons of experience supporting families with neurodivergent kids using a strengths-based, inclusive approach. This episode has actionable tips, and I hope it will help you and your family set up for success this summer and in summers to come. Welcome to Single Parenting with Connection, Not Perfection, the podcast that honors your messy reality. It's the support you crave without the usual emotional landmines. I'm your host, Dr. Gila, and I promise I will never tell you to just tag your partner in. Before we start, quick reminder. While I am a licensed psychologist and a certified coach, this podcast is not coaching and it's not therapy, and it's not a replacement for medical or psychological advice. It is for educational and informational purposes only. All right, let's dive in. Debbie, welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So you are an expert on all things neurodivergence. It's such an honor to have you here. We're heading into summer, which is challenging for a lot of parents, neurodivergence or otherwise. I'd love to chat today with your expertise, your neurodivergent expertise hat on. You have a hat on physically today. So yeah. So let's chat about going into summer, how parents can set everyone up for success.
It's so funny. I was just talking with a group of parents in my community the other night about this very thing because it's time to be signing up for camps, and some kids don't want to go to camps. And I remember, my kid's 21, but back in the day, the, signing up for camps was a massive project for me because I needed to know that the whole summer was covered. And of course, most of those camps crashed and burned, but I tried for many years to make that happen. But to take a step back, one of the things that I talk a lot about is just the importance of being really intentional, right? About the summer for the whole family. Like, if you think about summer as a family affair, and so, your kids are gonna have needs, you're gonna have needs, your kids are gonna have expectations, you're gonna have your expectations, and so much of the stress and disappointment potentially, and when things kind of, go off the rails tends to happen because of expectations that were never kind of vocalized and,
Mhm.
brought to the surface. And so, that's kind of one of the first things I really encourage, parents to do is to sit down with their kids, not just once, but multiple times and start like kind of thinking like, what are you thinking about for this summer? What do you want it to feel like?
Mhm.
What's one thing you really want to try to do? Or if you could do anything, if your summer could look any way it could look, what would it look like? And just have these kind of loose, almost brainstorming sessions, not a promise that any of it's gonna happen, but just so
Yeah.
everybody gets to share what
Mhm.
their ideas are, and that can be a really good start.
Yeah, I am such a huge proponent of giving your kids a piece of the conversation and not just like as an exercise in sort of seeming like you care, but actually listening to what they're saying and which is can be hard because of course we have stressors and we have pressures of our own, especially when it comes to summer, but really listening to them. And I want to call out one thing that you said because I think it's so important, which is that it's not a one and done conversation. It's multiple conversations that might take revisiting.
Yeah, you're exactly right. When our kids say kind of wild things, maybe like, well, I want to, be on screens for 12 hours a day, or I don't want to change out of my pajamas, except for maybe once a week, or I wanna go to the, what's that trampoline place, like the
Oh,
jump
bounce.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, whatever, those places that are, like, my nightmare, I'm gonna do that every week, so
Yeah.
we wanna just listen, "Oh, wow, you have some really big plans," right? I think that being really
Yeah.
curious and open and not shutting anything down, you're just gathering information is a really important, aspect, so our kids feel really
Yeah.
heard, right?
Yeah, right, so taking twice as long as you think to listen and receive instead of shutting down or saying no. Yeah,
Yeah.
and there might be kernels of what they're saying that there might be pieces that are not possible, but you might be able to take some, like, kernel or essence from what they're asking for and make it feasible.
Yeah, because sometimes if we ask, "Oh, I'm so curious to know what is it about that you're so excited about?" If we can get
Yeah.
to what the underlying desire is,
Yes.
sometimes that is something we can actually meet even if the way was initially requested or expressed isn't possible.
Yes, absolutely. And I think also what you're bringing up is like we parents go into things with expectations and visions of how things they have to this needs to happen and this needs to happen, which may be true, right? You may need childcare for a certain amount of time or, the parameters that need to be met. And so it can be hard to be open and receptive to hearing your child when you have these expectations.
Yeah. You're making me think of this summer where things really did not go well. Uh, I was Well, I homeschooled my kiddo for a number of years, and so
Mm.
summer was like, "Oh, great, I get more time with this child," right? I really wanted a break, but I remember one summer, I was calling it the summer of independence, and it wasn't my independence, it was, "We are going to crush all of these independent life skills this summer." And I
Mm.
had a list of all these things that I wanted my child to master by the end of the summer, right? It was like everything from like doing chores to being able to cross the street safely to being able to run an errand to be like, and I got started with this and I luckily I had a friend who was kind of advising me at the time. She was like a parent coach who was helping with my curriculum during homeschool and she was like, "Oh, Debbie." She's like, you need to abort this plan right now. You're gonna push your child over the edge." But I really and I listened to her, thank goodness, and I did
Yeah.
kind of pivot pretty quickly, but I was very attached to, "We have to make the most of this summer. This is an opportunity to get stuff done,
Yeah.
to grow, to evolve." Like, I it was the time to really catch up on stuff, and so that was also a really good reminder for me
Yeah.
that we all also just need breaks often
Yeah.
in the summer.
Yeah. Definitely. Right. So we discount the merit and the importance of downtime, I think,
Mhm.
and rest and recovery and breaks. And then with that topic in particular, so I know a lot of what you're passionate about is this kind of paradigm shift in how we think about our neurodivergent kids. And one thing that I have learned again and again and again with my own kid is that when he is not yet ready for some developmental skill, new piece of independence, or whatever it may be, it is a slog. It is challenging. No one's happy. And when I can wait and be more tuned in to his readiness, it goes so much more smoothly and with so much less friction and meltdowns and conflict and, challenge on my end. And so, yeah, as you were saying that you had this list of independent skills, I thought, ooh, I can guess how that went.
Yeah, not so good, not so good. I think that summer in particular, I pivoted to having kind of themes for each week.
Mm,
Nature week. We're gonna go to parks every day this week because I
yeah,
needed to be in nature, and I did really kind of, um, shift gears, but I think you're exactly right, and especially with neurodivergent kids, that the asynchronicity of their development and their
yep,
timelines are so all over the place, and so anytime we're attached to a specific age or this idea that this needs to happen now and this is the summer for this or and I wrote about this in my book that
yeah,
like, well, it's second grade, you got to learn how to write cursive or we have these kind of ideas
yep,
and those. those things aren't ever really gonna pan out well, especially with kids who are more demand avoidant. They may
Yep.
reject the idea and decide they never want to engage in it,
Mhm.
or they'll do it, but they won't have a sense of autonomy about it, right? So
Yep.
it really is about backing off and respecting where they are, and
Yeah.
that will often look different than where we think they should be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking of so many examples from my own life where that was true. So, when it comes to parenting neurodivergent kids in particular over the summer, so really, giving them a voice and listening to what it is that they're looking for, trying to release some of your agenda and expectations. Any other tips in terms of neurodivergent kids in particular?
I mean, I think a lot of neurodivergent kids are pretty burned out by the end of the
Yeah.
school year, and so they need a break. Like, they need
Yeah.
to rest. They need often, especially if they've been getting feedback from school that they're doing things wrong or their nervous systems have been really kind of escalated chronically just to survive in the school day. They just need to feel
Yeah.
safe and to chill, and that can be so hard for parents because that looks like pajamas and screen time sometimes. It might look like not leaving the room or getting outside and getting fresh air some days, and, it really depends on the level of burnout that your child is in, if that's
Mhm.
what's going on, but even if they're not burned out, just understanding the demands that they are typically navigating day to day just by living in a world not designed for them and
Yeah.
being in more traditional school settings, giving them a chance to really just kind of play and have fun and explore their interests and of course, noticing where that stuff triggers you and you start our anxiety can get involved and we can start really
Mhm.
worrying. What does this mean? And my child hasn't left the room in 3 days or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but I think they really do need that time. So it's really about us as parents always kind of checking ourselves, realizing when we're getting anxious and what's that all about? What am I making it mean that my child
Mhm.
is, doing X, Y, or Z? What would
Yeah.
be the worst thing that could happen if my kid is super unproductive the entire summer and just rests? Would that be so bad? Like, I think we need to
Yeah.
really question these ideas that we're just kind of parenting on autopilot and
Mhm.
and not kind of considering what's actually best for our child.
Yeah, parenting on autopilot and also all these, like, narratives that we've internalized that, "Oh, they're being lazy," or
Mhm.
"I'm being lazy by letting them watch TV," or whatever it may be. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think let's talk about screens for a minute because I think this is a big fear and a big, like, discomfort point for a lot of parents. Whether your kid is neurodivergent or not, but I think it might be even more prominent in neurodivergent households. If we're saying we're gonna listen to what they wanna do and we're gonna let them rest, a lot of parents, I bet, are thinking, "Well, then they're just gonna play Minecraft all day,"
Mhm.
right? And there's a lot of
Yeah.
fears that come up around that. What do you say to parents who are worried about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable, and I spent many years being really worried about it myself, so I
Yeah.
totally get it. I think there's a couple things. One is that for a lot of neurodivergent kids, screen time is really regulating.
Mhm.
So we know that also transitions off screens can be incredibly dysregulating, right? So there
Yes.
can be like a cost to everything. But for a lot of kids, especially again, if they're coming out of a season where they're really pretty like burned out, just kind of vegging on a screen and also I'm sure you talk about this, like not all screen time is the same, right? So there's
Exactly, yeah.
there's, kind of passively consuming and swiping through YouTube videos, and then there's being in a sandbox game like Minecraft and doing cool stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think as parents, what I recommend, and I'm a big fan of Dr. Deborah Heitner's work, and she wrote Screenwise, and she always talks about the importance of mentoring over monitoring. And
Mm.
really, the goal is to help our kids ultimately have a healthy relationship with screens and technology. So, if that's the goal, then we want our kids to develop an awareness of how do I feel when I've been on a screen for 12 hours a day, like, and look for opportunities not to be like, "Oh, I told you so. You're of course you have a
Yes.
headache," but be like, Yeah, I was wondering about that because 'cause you've been on screens all day. I know I get a headache when I've been on screens all day." So,
Yeah.
so just, like, looking for opportunities to help them kind of develop their own, I guess, screen literacy in terms of what it means for them.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm a big fan of guidelines versus strict rules. And I will say that while saying I also had very strict rules for a lot of years. And I had like contracts and we had screen time planning worksheets that my kid would fill out because, how much time do you get? What is your plan? How will you transition? Like we were always proactively trying to navigate this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but so much of the unhappiness in our home was centered around transitioning off screens or screen limits. And so
Yeah.
I slowly let those go and I started thinking about guidelines instead. Like,
Mhm.
as long as you move your body, as long as we get outside, as long as these other things happen, as long as we have dinner, whatever it looks like, it has to be tied to your values as a family. But
Right.
um, that was the direction that I found created less overall stress, and it preserved my relationship with my child a lot more than always
Mhm.
being stuck in um, this battle. So if I'm just kind of blathering on now, but if you're facing a summer and your concerns are my kid is going to be on screens all day, every day, I think that's a conversation you have with your child, and you even say, "This is my concern, and I'm feeling
Right.
like I'm not doing my job properly if I were to let you do this, because I'm also responsible for your physical health and that making sure you get enough sleep and those things. So how can we come up with some guidelines together so that
Mhm.
both of our needs are met?" And I think you can start doing that from a pretty early age, depending
Yeah.
on where your kid is at. So if you do it
Yeah.
in that collaborative way, I think that's a good start to navigating the screen
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the things that we were talking about at the beginning about conversations about summer in general apply here also where right, so really hearing what it is that they're experiencing and what they want and what it is that they like about screens, and also keeping in mind that it's probably not going to be a one and done conversation, and you mentioned this in your own home, right? It's and I've had the same thing in my home that it's sort of this iterative process of, like, you come up with a plan together and you try it out, and maybe it works for a little while, and then you notice things are challenging, and then you have another conversation and come up with another plan, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's failing. It means that you're still it's a process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's my kind of golden rule. You do what works until it stops working, and then you come up with the next plan. Like,
Yeah.
that's parenting.
It's right, and that I think is really also helpful modeling for our kids, right? Because that's problem solving that applies to other parts of life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Any tips for parents on, you had mentioned like looking at our own fears that are coming up and our own beliefs around it. And summertime can be challenging for parents and stressful. Any tips on that, on the internal piece of it as you're navigating summer with a neurodivergent kid?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a really big fan of, like, lowering the bar in
Mm,
general, and this is something I have to work on constantly because I run a community for parents of neurodivergent kids, so my bar's kinda high, but I'm like, "No, Debbie, that's not your bar needs to be low too." So,
yeah.
we we are so hard on ourselves and we beat ourselves up so often for not doing all the things, and the guilt that I hear from families, and I'm sure you hear this too from parents, like
Yeah.
the guilt and I'm not doing enough and they are on screens too much and I'm failing and I'm going to screw up my kid. Like we have this ongoing internal dialogue. So,
Yeah.
one would be just trying to disrupt that internal voice with and replace it with some self-compassion,
Mhm.
and that can be I'm a big fan of Dr. Kristen Neff's work, and she has a great, 5-minute self-compassion meditation on her website that when I'm in a really low moment, I'll just go there and I'll listen to it. But
Mm.
just when you notice you're kind of shaming yourself or guilting yourself, just being like, this is really hard what I'm doing. There's no rules for this, and I'm doing the
Mhm.
best that I can.
Yeah.
And just kind of have some kind of a mantra to bring yourself back to that, you know.
Yeah.
Um, Also, we don't want our kids to see us beating ourselves up or to kind of have that energy as well. Cause as you said,
Yes.
we're modeling, they're
We're
watching
modeling. Yep.
everything that we're doing. Um, yeah, and I would just say if you do have these beliefs, right? If you can identify what it is that you're telling yourself, like how you're screwing your child up specifically,
Mhm.
like, you work with, parents in this way, but like have them like come up with evidence for how that's not true or find another way to think about that. I think
Mhm.
it's that autopilot, these unexamined ideas that we have that we're kind of this is a moral failing. But if we actually really look at it, it's like, is that really accurate? How do I know? I mean, my kid's a
Yeah.
computer science major in university right now. My kid who has spent a lot of time on screens, right?
Yeah.
But it's all worked out because now that's the area of interest and all of that. I couldn't have predicted that this
Right.
was where, my kid would end up, but we don't know how things are gonna turn out, right? So if we
Yeah.
prioritize our connection with our kids, being gentle and compassionate with ourselves, trying to stay regulated ourselves, which is
Yes.
huge,
Easier said than done, right?
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and trying to doing something, one little thing for yourself every day, finding a little micro moment to take a breath
Mm.
even, I think we have to prioritize all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And you also mentioned that you have a group, and I think that's also another piece, right? Reminding yourself, having reminders that you are not the only one who is feeling this way and
Yeah.
struggling with this. There's a reason the topic of screens comes up so much on my podcast because it's such a universal challenge right now for parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're not
It
alone.
it is the Wild West, right? And I feel like it just gets more and more complicated and nobody knows what they're doing. Like,
Yeah.
there's no like right way to do any of this, right? There's no point in beating ourselves up. We just have to stay attuned to who our kid is. What does my
Yeah.
child need? Is this working for them? Do I feel that they're okay? Are we moving too far in this direction? Do we need to make a correction? And again, going back to our connection, our relationship with our child, and making sure they feel that we are collaborating with them, right? That we
Yeah.
are kind of seeing and respecting their experience, and then let's figure this out together.
Yeah.
I think that's the best we've got right now. There are no rules.
Mhm. Yeah, the process and the journey, not just the outcome and the solution. Yeah, absolutely. Any other tips, especially as we're thinking of neurodivergent kids over the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of having plans, like having a calendar
Mhm.
for, not just for the summer, but having a weekly calendar because often in the summer is when you're like slipping in like a dentist appointment, or maybe you're going to, grandma's house for a week or whatever. Like
Mhm.
everything's disrupted. And especially for neurodivergent kids, that can be really
Yes.
difficult when
Yeah.
it's less predictable. So planning in advance is really helpful. And so I advise parents to have a calendar. You could have a monthly calendar looking at the big picture, and then having a weekly calendar, and then having a little check in every morning where you not
Mm.
just go over what's happening today, but you go over the whole week, right?
Mhm.
So that every morning, so say it's Monday morning, you're looking at the calendar together over pancakes or whatever. And oh, yeah. So today we're gonna, today's a chill day. You can hang on your pajamas. Tomorrow, remember we have that play date and you're going to the pool with Jennifer. I don't know. Um, and then third, and you just go through the whole week. And then Tuesday, you do the same thing. So by the time that dentist appointment or whatever comes on Friday,
Mm.
they've been reminded every day. And so
Yeah.
it'll kind of prepare them. And you can also find out if there are things coming up that they're anxious about, they're worried about, and then you can do that proactive problem solving. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what's going on? I can tell you seem like you're not excited about this. What are you concerned about? Let's see what we can figure out. And so
Yeah.
I think that is a really important thing to be doing, especially again because there's no routines, people's energy is off. And one other thing I'll say, if you're going on a holiday or something, you're going to the beach for a week on
Mhm.
vacation or somewhere new, I used to make the equivalent of a PowerPoint presentation. I just had too much time on my hands apparently, but I would have like a picture of the place and this is
Yeah,
what your room's going to be like. And here's what our plan is for the day. And this motel has a swimming pool. And that was always a priority for my child. So it was like, okay,
yeah,
let's make sure we build in swim time for you every single day. Let's make
yep,
sure we build in a day where there's nothing to do so you can recover from the trip. Let's make sure. And so doing that with visuals and going
yeah.
through that in advance, it can really preempt a lot of that kind of dysregulation because everything feels so chaotic.
Yeah, it's like a social story
Yeah.
almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so both with the calendar and with prep for the vacation, you're combining the visual cues with the verbal cues, with connection with the parent and repetition and giving them a sense of like even though things aren't predictable in terms of like being consistent and regular, they're predictable in terms of they have advanced warning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gives them a sense of control too, because if there's something that they're really concerned about, and you'll know,
Mhm.
usually our kids will make it pretty clear if they're not
Yes.
happy about something that's planned. But then we're not going to dismiss that. We're going to be like, okay, let's talk about this. How can we make this work? Or, what what might be a better situation? And so, giving our kids a little sense of control where we can, we
Yeah.
can't necessarily have them dictate where we're going, but we might be able to say, well, we could leave after breakfast. Would that make it feel better? Just little things that help
Yeah.
our kids feel like they're not just kind of victims of our whim.
Right. And I also, when you were talking about planning the vacation and that you knew that your kid really liked pools, and so you're baking that into the plan. And I think that kind of thing, right? Getting to know what does set your child up for success. So one thing I often share is there was a period of time where my kiddo really needed one day of the weekend where we didn't leave the house. And it's not always possible, but to really prioritize that because if it does make a difference in the grand scheme, it's worth, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
really listening to that and prioritizing that. So another child might need outside time before 10 a.m. every day. And so prioritizing that. So getting to know what your child needs and being intentional and proactive about building that into the plan. Yeah.
And talking to them about it too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I know you are someone who needs one day on the weekend, so let's
Hmm.
make sure we make that happen, right?
So, one thing that is coming to mind, I know there may be parents listening and saying, okay, it would be amazing if I had the flexibility in my schedule to let my kid do whatever they wanted, but I have to work. I can't just leave my kid at home on the computer all day by themselves. Do you have any tips on really like if you do have these constraints where you do need to find some activity, childcare, something like that, how to navigate that and really, again, set everyone up for success?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important if you're looking for camps or, places where your child can spend the day is looking for places that are understanding of and aware of neurodivergence, right?
Yeah.
And I would have to do phone calls with like every camper program that I ever signed my kid up for. And just, do you have
Mhm.
experience with kids with ADHD? How do you handle
Mhm.
if my child decides that they don't wanna participate? Or, so I would do a lot of it's a pain, but it will help set your child up for success if you do that research ahead of time. I would recommend not, like, sending your kid in with fingers crossed and a wing and a prayer that it's gonna work out, like,
Mhm.
especially if it's a camp situation or a drop-in daycare or something like that. um, the more information they have, the more they and your kid is gonna be set up for success, and
Yeah.
so having those conversations, and then if you find good environments, like, I would send my kiddo to, I'm thinking of like a it was like a claymation camp or something back in Seattle. I know
Oh,
it was
cool.
pretty cool. It didn't work out great ultimately because the social dynamic was pretty tricky for my kid. But, I would talk to the teacher was great. And I would say, okay, my child has 2 books in the backpack. And if they get dysregulated, they will happily sit. and read, just let them do their own thing and they'll come back when they're ready, right? So
Yeah.
just, almost giving an instruction manual for what your child
Mhm.
needs if they get dysregulated. So that
Yeah.
would be my advice is just trying to be really proactive. And there are
Mhm.
a lot, I think especially now more and more than back 10 years ago when I was doing this for my kid, there's just a much
Yeah.
more awareness, and sometimes there are programs specifically for neurodivergent kids, and those are the best when you can find them because you're like, I
Yes.
don't have to explain anything. You know what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and just asking around. There's always like in social media, like on Facebook groups, there's always a flurry of activity, like of
Yes.
parents by region looking for neurodivergent friendly experiences for their kids in the summer.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. Right. And then, so being proactive in terms of asking questions before you choose a camp, but then also I heard you talk about really communicating with the camp and like preparing them as best you can and advocating for what you know about your kid and what they need to succeed.
Yeah.
And I think the question example you gave was such a great one because it's one that I have learned the hard way is a really important one to ask. What do you do if the child doesn't want to do an activity? And if your child is going to have a really hard time with that, to really make sure that they're okay with whatever needs to happen. And then the other piece was the social piece that you sort of alluded to, and
Yeah.
I've experienced this also. It can be the most amazing camp, but if the social dynamics are challenging, it's not going to work out well. And so maybe another question of how do you handle it when there are difficult social dynamics, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I will say too, if you can send your child to camp with a friend, like sometimes just having
Mm,
one friend can be
yeah,
protective, can be at least they have somebody kind of on
yeah.
their, on their team who has their back.
Hmm.
Yeah, the social stuff is just always tricky
It's hard.
with their kids, and you just don't know what the dynamic's going to be. But yeah, I think it is a really good question to ask ahead of time. How will you
Yeah.
navigate this? And you could tell them my kid has a lot of social anxiety or really struggles with games, competition, and that could be dysregulating. And then that can be
Yes.
really off putting to other kids. So, how can we work around that? So,
Yeah.
I think, like, again, preparing whoever the camp leader is or the program director is with what potential problems could be
Yeah.
and like figuring out what the plan would be if that happens.
Yeah. Are there any other, like, specific questions that you think would be helpful to ask when you're researching places?
I would just again ask what their experience is. I would want to know, have you had kids like this in the past? How has it worked out?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just those kind of general questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will add, I know some kids really don't like swimming or changing in front of other kids. That's been an issue, and so if you know that those are sensitive topics for your kid, specifically asking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything, anything that can be a challenge for your
Yeah.
child. Again, like games are a huge trigger for a
Yeah.
lot of neurodivergent kids because again, the unpredictability or especially games of chance, like, nearly destroyed our family, right?
Yes.
So, because they're games of chance, right? You just don't know what's gonna happen. So, I think
Yeah.
any of that information, if you understand these are typically areas where my kid could get massively dysregulated, that is good information to find out and just ask, "Do you
Mhm.
play games? Does every child have to participate in a game? If a child doesn't wanna participate, what would they be doing?" All of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Super helpful. Before we wrap up, any other last minute, like, little tips for summer with neurodivergent kids?
Again, I would say, like, lower the bar, do not plan, like, a summer of independence like I did, like and for you too as a parent, right? I think we go into summer often, even if we're working and our kids are, not going to be home all day or whatever, it's a break for everybody. And we might
Mhm.
have this idea, just like our kids do, about something that we want to accomplish or how we want to feel by the end of the summer or, the gardening project that we want to get done or whatever that is. So, again, I would just say if you notice that there's these kind of expectations or demands that you're placing on yourself about what has to happen. I'm a
Mm.
big fan of like, what can I just let go of? What can I completely just ditch and be really, it's kind of like an author, like kill your darlings, right? Like what can you just edit out of your summer to simplify? Because
Yeah.
even when I think I've simplified massively, I still have way too many things on my plate, you know?
Yeah.
So, um, I think we're just, yeah, we're all really busy and we're all super depleted right now. So
Yeah.
the more you can just take off your plate and simple down to like what really matters, which is our relationship with our child and
Mhm.
taking care of ourselves. That's
Yep.
really it.
Yeah. Really centering and prioritizing that big picture of what matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. Before we go, I have these 2 questions. So, this is
Yeah.
a podcast about single parenting with connection, not perfection. And so, I'd love if you'd share something that you do that fosters connection in your life, either with yourself, with a kiddo in your life, or with someone else.
Now I had one thing to share, which I will share, but I'm also thinking of like with my friends, I foster connection by I am
Yeah.
that person who will randomly like reach out and just send a text. I'm thinking of you, or I'll remember something is happening in someone's life and I'll send them a little note. That
Mm.
is really important to me. Like
Yeah.
I'm a friend collector, and when people are really meaningful to me, I don't let those people go. And so
Mhm.
I do that. That's how I stay connected, and those relationships are so important to me. And
Yeah.
then for my kiddo, who is, you know, again at university, not in the country right now, and really not super communicative with me, which is like so brutal because we are so close, but having like homeschooled and had this very intimate relationship. Um, so I just pebble them constantly. I sent them
Mm.
a meme. I send really obnoxious memes and then I'm like, "I'm so funny." Like, I'm trying to I wanna get an eye roll out of them.
Yeah.
If I don't see it happening, that's what I'm trying to do. And just, like, sending little check-ins like, "I love you," thinking of you, and never not expecting a reply. Like, I just
Mm.
want them to always know that I'm here and I'm rooting for them.
Mm. So I hear a thread between those 2, so doing it
Yeah,
with your kiddo and also with your friends. I love
yeah.
that. Yeah, that's beautiful. And then where is some place in your life that you have embraced imperfection?
I mean, I think it is really that has been the theme of the past, decade of my life, really.
Yeah.
Um, and it's something I'm still unpacking with my therapist.
Mm.
But, as someone who had kind of undiagnosed neurodivergence myself, and so was always feeling like I had to be perfect or perform at a certain level, but also like faking it, right? Because it was
Yeah.
so hard for me and feeling like, but I have to do this or I won't be seen as good enough or smart enough and all of those things.
Yeah.
So that has been just a common theme in my life and my whole adult life. And so I'm really just like breaking all of that down and I'm just showing up, especially within my parenting community and my work, which is like where I spend all of my time, if I'm being honest. Um,
Yeah.
just like as the messy human that I am. And I'm just, instead of apologizing for the things that are hard for me, I'm just like, yeah, this is really hard for me. And,
Yeah.
you know, I have super slow processing speed, so deal with it, as opposed to I have to be able to memorize this chalk and do it perfectly. No, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
So I'm really leaning into that, and I'm also I think it's, I'm again TMI, but I'm like I'm past the perimenopausal journey, and I think I'm just like whatever. Like I'm at that
Mhm.
stage of life where I'm like I'm just doing my own thing, and leaning into all the imperfection.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much. If people want to connect, where's the best place for them to find you?
Tiltparenting.com is kind of the home base for my podcast and my community and my book and
Mhm.
all the things. Yeah. And it's the same
Great.
on social media at Parenting.
Great. And I'll put all those links in the show notes. Thank
Awesome.
you so much for being here. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was great.
That's it for this episode. I am so glad you found your way here. And remember, even if you're on your own, you don't have to do it alone. You've got this.